Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Quick Poetry Knowledge, and this is Mehjabin. In my last video, I explained Walter de la Mare's poem, The Listeners. Check it out. If you haven't already, you will find a link in the description box. In that video, I explained this poem line by line. In today's video, I am going to narrate the summary of the poem, and I will also talk about the theme. Walter de la Mare loves to dwell upon the night scene in his poems. Do watch my video on his poem, Silver. You will get a pretty good idea about the kind of poetry Walter de la Mare likes to focus on. The Listeners is mysterious with an element of the ghostly in it. So let's check out the poem in detail. The traveller appeared in front of an isolated cottage in the middle of the woods. It was night time and the light of the moon had fallen on the door. The traveller knocked the door and asked if there was anybody inside the house. It was very quiet outside. The forest was filled with ferns. The traveller's horse began to munch the grass growing on the ground. A bird, which had probably been disturbed by the sudden breaking of the silence, now flew out of the tower attached to a part of the house. The bird just passed over the head of the traveller. The visitor knocked on the door a second time. One more time, he asked if there was anybody inside the house. However, the traveller got no response. No head popped out of the windowsill, which was bordered by leaves. Nobody leaned over to look into his grey eyes. The lack of response made the visitor confused. He was astounded as well. However, the traveller felt the presence of a group of spirits inside the house. He got the feeling that some ghostly beings were listening to the words he had uttered in the silence of the moonlit night. These supernatural elements must have heard that one voice which was coming from the world of human beings. The faint light of the moon crowded on the dark staircase inside the house. This staircase led downward into an empty hall inside the building. The surrounding air got shaken by the voice of the lonely traveller. The visitor got the sense that his listeners were some airy beings. They were not normal. Their strange silence seemed to be giving him a reply. The horse continued to move while it fed on the dark grass below. The thick leaves of the trees hung over the traveller's head. When he looked up, he could see only leaves, and through the gaps he could also see the stars gleaming in the night sky. The traveller knocked on the door a third time. It was an unexpected knock. His voice was louder than before. The traveller lifted his head and told the ghostly listeners to inform the masters of the house about his arrival. He told the listeners to convey the message to the owners that he had come just as he had promised and that nobody replied to his call. The listeners did not make any movement. However, every single word uttered by the man echoed through the darkness of the silent house. All these echoed words came from the mouth of the only person who was awake in the middle of that night. Yes, the ghostly listeners heard the sound of the traveller's foot as it landed on the stirrup attached to the saddle of his horse. Then The sound of iron could be heard. The iron was striking upon the gravel on the ground. The original silence of the house and its surrounding environment got restored when the retreating sound of the horse's hooves could no longer be heard. The theme of the poem is related to the ghostly and supernatural forces dwelling in nature. The poet seems to convey the feeling that the world is inhabited with certain mysterious forces. There are unexplained happenings around us. Man somehow learns to adapt with these weird and spooky energies around him. Sometimes these unseen elements can even give solace and company to a lonely soul. The poet tries to convey the message that the supernatural elements in nature may not be entirely negative. In fact, they can be friendly in a strange and distant kind of way. However, despite the repeated knocks and calls of the traveler, there doesn't seem to be any response for him from the world of men. The poet seems to give the impression that life is a lonely journey. There is quite a bit of gloom and isolation all around. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for sticking around. Do not forget to check out my previous video containing line-by-line explanation of this poem. Consider subscribing to this channel. Click on the description box for the notes on today's lesson. Meet you again very soon. Bye.